Well, thank you so much. And I appreciate all of you all getting up this morning and coming to join us, and especially our panelists from Department of Education. I know it's a complicated process here, and there are a lot of challenges last year in the application process, and took some time for people to work their way through it. But we want to make sure that we make it as easy as possible and give you the information that you need to get it done, because the financial aid aspect of this for many families, in fact, the vast majority of families, is a real critical piece. Sometimes it can determine where you end up deciding to go to school or not. Now, I was just joking before we started. I had 6 kids and none of them had a jump shot. So we didn't get any athletic scholarships. We didn't get anything that way. We had to work our way through the financial aid process. But having said that, there's a lot of money out there. Various schools have, very good financial aid packages they can offer. But this is the fundamental piece, the FAFSA application, to help get you started. And so I'll turn it over to the panelists. I'm going to mute myself and shut down my camera because I'm not really very knowledgeable on this topic. My youngest kid's 24, so we went through this a while ago now, but we want to make sure you get the information you need this morning. And with that, I'll turn it back over. Thanks so much.
And thank you, Congressman Ivey and team. We want to thank you again for joining in. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you for the invitation to speak to your constituents about this topic around federal financial aid. Things have changed for the better, and I think we have made some vast improvements over last year, and we hope that the parents and students on the call today will learn a few things and that will help them prepare for the 25-26 application year, which has begun. So as the screen says, ways to pay for college or career school. That's what we're going to talk about. Let's go to our agenda. And again, I want to welcome our colleague, Isaiah Ellis, who will also be co-presenting some information today. So thank you, Isaiah, for joining us as well. Today's agenda, we're going to talk a little bit about the 25-26 FAFSA form. As I mentioned, it is out, it is live, it is available for those students who are currently in the 12th grade, preparing to go to college in the fall. This is the application for you. We're also going to cover not only preparing, but how to complete the FAFSA form. And also we'll learn a little bit about the financial aid process, and then we'll get some additional resources to you that will help you in your journey. And then, as was mentioned earlier by Angie, we're going to go over some questions at the end. So if you have questions, hold them, and we'll try to answer them one by one and get you some clarity. Next slide. Preparing for the 25-26 FAFSA form. What is the FAFSA? And for those who don't know, it stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. And the operative word is free. So we don't want you to be duped and pay anybody to get this information or do the application, where we can help you get through the application process with ease. But it is the application form that determines one's eligibility for federal student aid, such as grants, work study funds, or loans. So we know some of you may participate in all the programs I just mentioned, or just one or two, but it is the beginning phase or the beginning step that one must go through. It's also, in addition, many states and colleges use this form to determine eligibility for their funds. Again, I mentioned state aid on Maryland, MHEC. They also give funds to residents of Maryland, so they go by the FAFSA form. So you must submit the FAFSA form as well. And some private providers also provide funds for those students who have completed the FAFSA form, as well as institutions. So they use this form to determine who qualifies to receive their dollars. So we want to make sure that you're submitting the FAFSA application. Next slide. Eligibility for federal student aid. What's that all about? Most students are eligible for federal financial aid to help pay for college or career school or trade school. So these are dollars that can be used whether you go to school in-state, out-of-state, or you have go to private school or public school. But again, while your income is taken into consideration when completing the form, it isn't the only thing your school considers when offering federal student aid. So you want to go through the process. And at the bottom of the screen, we've given you the URL, studentaid.gov/eligibility for more details. So you take advantage of that when you get a free moment today. Eligibility for federal student aid. To receive federal student aid, again, the student must obtain a college degree. You must be moving towards a college degree, trade school education. You must be enrolled at a particular school, working towards that degree, a bachelor's degree or associate's degree or degree certificate program. And you must be a U.S. citizen or eligible non-citizen. And on the form, you have to provide consent and approval. There's a checkbox you have to check to provide that consent. And then you'll sign the certification statement. And while you're in school, you must maintain what's called satisfactory academic progress. You may have heard of a term called SAP, but that's where you have to maintain at least a 2.0 or C grade level or above. So we want you to make sure that you're familiar with all the eligibility criteria. As I mentioned before, we provided the resource below on the screen, the URL. You can take time to go there and find more information accordingly. Next slide. Critical, creating a studentaid.gov account. As I mentioned, the FAFSA form is the beginning form, but even before that, you must create a studentaid.gov account. That's going to be your account that will house all your information around financial aid. It will be your account throughout your educational process. Who must complete an account? Again, the student who's going to college and their contributors. And we'll talk a little bit more about the contributor in a second. But again, the student and the contributors must each have their own FSA ID or studentaid.gov account. So it's referred to sometimes as an FSA ID, but it's the same thing. And it's basically a username and password. And it's your access to complete the FAFSA form online. And we require or ask that contributors do not share the information. So once you obtain your username and password, like your bank account debit card, you want to make sure that it maintains privacy and you don't share the information. You must have your own individual separate FSA ID or studentaid.gov account. Now, how do you create that account? The student and the contributors can visit studentaid.gov, or you can go straight to the FAFSA.gov website. There's a link there, and you'll follow the instructions, and it'll walk you through a very simple process to obtain that account. It's a one-time account. You don't have to do it every year. So once you do it this year for this application, you're good to go for life, unless something major changes, but we don't anticipate that. But that is your one-stop account. We want everybody to make sure that you are signing up for your account as soon as possible. And we definitely want to make sure our students and their contributors get their account as soon as possible. Next slide. Again, now, who is a contributor? A contributor is anyone who is required to provide information on the student's FAFSA form. So again, I mentioned earlier, the contributor is the student who's going to college and whoever else is providing information on the FAFSA form. And that typically is going to be your spouse, if you're married, or your biological or adopted parent, or a parent's spouse. So we'll make sure that's going to be your step parent. But now, what's critical, a contributor isn't. It is not a grandparent, a foster parent, or aunt, uncle, or cousin, or brother or sister. Even if they help you through high school or help raise you in the process, we do not want their information on the FAFSA form. We only want the student who will be attending college, and we only want the biological parent. So if you don't have a biological parent, for whatever reason, we have an option or a process for you as well. But we don't want anyone other than a parent, biological parent or adopted parent, because adoption makes you a legal parent. We only want those individuals on the actual form. So don't be confused or give us any information outside the parameters I've mentioned here before. Next slide. Who counts as a parent on the FAFSA form? Very interesting. Again, I mentioned being identified as a contributor on the FAFSA form. It won't necessarily make you responsible for paying all the educational expenses for the student, but it is the contributor who we will use to help determine one's eligibility for federal aid. This is a simple chart here you see on the screen that will outline who and provide some guidance as to who the parent should be assisting the student on the FAFSA form. Let's take a look. Well, if you're a parent who is married, let's go back one slide, Isaiah. Yeah. So if you're a parent, a spouse, if you're married, both the parents' information is needed on the FAFSA form. And if you file jointly, your tax return will require that information on the FAFSA form. If you're divorced or unmarried, both of the students' information may be included on the FAFSA form. But if you're a parent and you've remarried, we'll look for the parent and the step-parents' information on the FAFSA form. So this is just a little chart to give you a little guidance and a little help to identifying whose information or who's a contributor along with the student for the FAFSA form. Next slide. Getting or gathering documents. For the upcoming 25 FAFSA form, as I mentioned, it's out, it's live, it is available, and it will be available. We said previously December 1, but we beat that deadline. Came out actually in November, so we're ahead of the curve. So get ready if you haven't already. Submit your FAFSA form so you can complete that FAFSA form as soon as possible, so you can be eligible for the most aid that is possible that meets the criteria. Here's what you'll need to access it. Again, I mentioned earlier your studentaid.gov account, your contributor information, and Isaiah will get more into detail about that contributor as well. Your and your contributor's federal income tax return information, and we'll be easy process for you to do that now. Records of your and your contributor's child support if you receive child support, and records about your assets, which will come from your tax return, quite frankly. And then you'll be able to list any schools you're interested in attending. So 6 easy steps or things you need to prepare for when completing the FAFSA form. And those schools that you're interested in, again, you can list up to 20 schools on that FAFSA form. So again, you can either list the first set of 10, and if you want to delete that and put a fresh set of 10, you can do that as well. And all the schools will get your information as you have requested. Next slide. Completing the 25-26 FAFSA form. Isaiah, you want to take it over from here?
Sure, and thanks, Fred.
Mm-hmm.
Now, over the next few slides, we're going to talk about dependency. We're going to answer many of your questions pertaining to, is my student an independent student or a dependent student? We'll cover high-level information based upon financials, as well as school selection, just much like what Fred just discussed about adding up to 20. What does that mean? And then we'll finish out in this section with information that you need to know about unusual circumstances. So let's start out with what makes an independent student. First and foremost, when you're thinking about independency and dependent students, you want to know, are you answering yes to any one of the questions on your screen? For those of you that joined us by phone, I'll go ahead and read it out. What makes an independent student is a person that is at least 24 years of old, or married, or a graduate or professional student, or a veteran or a member of the armed forces, an orphan, a ward of the court, or someone with legal dependents other than a spouse, or an emancipated minor, or someone who is homeless or risk of being homeless. If you're answering yes to any one of these questions, you may be considered an independent student. Now, again, you can probably answer yes to multiple questions, whether you're married and at least 24 years of age, but you only need to answer yes to only one of those. Now, if you answer no to all of those questions, then you will be treated as a dependent student. That means we will need information from your parents. Now, keep this in mind. Just because you're an independent student, we may need information from your spouse, which will require that spouse to become a contributor, and we will need information from them. Now, if we need information from the parent, and they will be also identified as a contributor, in both scenarios, when you're going into and completing the 25-26 FAFSA form, you will come to the section will allow you to invite a contributor. That's what we mean by inviting your spouse and inviting your parent. But you have to know what your dependency status is to know who you're going to invite. And when you enter their information onto the FAFSA form, you're going to enter their name, their email address, their date of birth, social security number. They will get sent an email letting them know they have been invited as a contributor and that they are required to establish or create a studentaid.gov account, much to what Fred said earlier. So if you haven't done so at this time, you want to make sure that you visit studentaid.gov in the upper right-hand corner. You're going to see a person icon. You're going to click on that icon, and you're going to go ahead and create an account. It takes about 3 days to process. After it has been processed, then you can go into your studentaid.gov account and retrieve the invitation that was sent to you by the student. Now, if you already been sent an invitation to become a contributor or to add information as a contributor, then you can go to your email, check your email. You'll see that you've been invited as a contributor. You can click on the link inside of the, or the button inside of that email. Just like you see on the right side of your screen, that's generally what the email is going to look like when you open it up. And you can go ahead and click log on, log in. You log in with your credentials at studentaid.gov, and then you can continue on providing your information on the 2526 FAFSA form. Now, on the FAFSA form itself, we also ask financial information. That's one of the common questions that we do receive, is that when someone is looking at the FAFSA form that they're completing, they tend to ask the question of, what tax year are you looking for? So a good rule of thumb is a prior year. So 25, 26, you take the first year, that 25, and then you minus 2 years from that. We're looking for the 2023 tax information. Now, if you're already enrolled in school or you plan to enroll in the spring semester, then you want to make sure that you are completing the 2024-25 FAFSA form, because that's this year. The 25-26 is for next year. So knowing what tax year or tax information that we are looking for is important, because as you're coming into the FAFSA form and you're asked to provide that consent and approval, then it's pulling different year than you may anticipate, especially if your financials have changed. And Fred is going to come and talk about that a little bit in the next section. So just understand what tax year that we're looking for and which one will be applied to that particular specific FAFSA form itself. We also ask information from the amount of child support received. When we are asking information about bank statements, we're asking for the current balance as of the day that you are completing that FAFSA form. We're also looking for net worth of investments. Net worth is just determined by what is it, appraisal, or what's the value of said product or the property, minus the expenditures, which is basically going to be the liens, any type of mortgages, things like that. And then you come up with your net. But we're only looking for investment property. You're not to put in information regarding the house that you live in or a farm that you live on. We're looking for investment properties only. And lastly, we're also looking for untaxed income that you also reported on to the IRS as well. Now, we also ask information about assets. And again, that comes down to the businesses, money in the bank account, investment property, and so forth. But we're looking for the net. So I want to keep that in mind, that I want to say that one more time for everyone. The net, not the gross, or not the general value of the property or of the investment. We're looking for the net. And when we say UGMAs and UTMAs, we're only looking for the accounts that you own. So if you own the account, then that you want to make sure you report it. But if you do not own the account and you're just a beneficiary, then you're not to put that on the FAFSA form itself. Other things not to put on the FAFSA form as well is not of your 401k, your pensions. We're not looking for those things. If you have a car stereo, yes, that was a thing back in the 90s, and I think I just aged myself. But you want to make sure that you're not adding in the network or the gross value of your car, your clothes, your furniture. Don't put those things. Those are not considered assets as it pertains to the free application for federal student aid. And again, once again, don't put the net worth of the home that you reside in. A couple other things as it pertains to also your excluded assets. As Fred stated before, whatever the question asks for, that's what you want to make sure you're placing inside of the fields. If it doesn't ask the information, you want to make sure you leave that to yourself. Now, when we cover it, we'll also be asked about the school selection. You could add up to 20. It's always best practice to add the school that's in state, and then followed by all the other institutions that you are interested in, such as college, universities, and/or career school. That's important, particularly if you're also joining us outside of the state of Maryland, or you're within another state in the United States of America. Because if you're residing in another state and they require that school or in-state school to be number one, they may have that high in value and to determine for their own state financial aid. So different people, when we say people, we mean organizations, utilize the FAFSA to determine how much you may be eligible for in terms of their aid. So you want to take that into consideration. But it's always good practice to put at least one four-year institution, one two-year institution, if you're interested, at least one vocational school. You don't have to have applied to these institutions. If you're just thinking about a school, you can put them on there as well, because as we're going to get into the financial aid process, what happens afterwards, you're going to see exactly how that process impacts your decision. Now, you may be experiencing an unusual circumstance. If you are experiencing unusual circumstances, such as the items that are listed or circumstances that are listed on your screen, then you want to make sure that you indicate so on the FAFSA form. You will be placed into provisional independent status, and then the school would verify your circumstance. So it's always good to, again, as Fred said earlier, gather your documents, talk to the right personnel, whether it's your college access career professional, higher education professional, your financial aid office, or your high school counselor. Make sure you talk to them about what potentially information you may need. Make sure you also call the school, ask them what documentation is acceptable, because different schools may require different documentation to verify your circumstance. So you want to make sure you're having a constant communication with them to enable and put you in the best position to have your financial aid process in a good amount of time so you can make an informed decision. At this time, I'm going to bring back in Fred, who is going to cover the financial aid process. Fred?
Thank you, Isaiah. Great information. The financial aid process, what's it all about? We're going to talk today about a few steps. We're going to get into first for those who may be interested in applying for your loans. If you're interested or in need of a student loan, this will be the process you will take. And we have the URL at the bottom of the screen as well, so you can follow up and get further details after today's presentation. You'll first submit and fill out your FAFSA form, as we've been talking about. That is critical. The FAFSA form is a must if you want to be considered for federal student loans in your educational process. You receive what's called a FAFSA submission summary after you submit that FAFSA form. The schools, not federal student aid, but the schools will send you your aid offers. They will determine your eligibility and they will send you an aid offer. So look for that. And then number 4, you choose which schools you'll actually attend and what aid to accept or decline. So once you do as Isaiah mentioned and you list those schools on your FAFSA form, once you determine which ones you specifically want to narrow down to and attend, they will have already sent you an award package, and you can pretty much accept what they've offered you, or you can decline, and that includes loans as well. But if you're interested in receiving student loans, the 5th state that you want to follow, or step you want to follow, is you'll sign the master promissory note, which is the actual loan application. And then the 6th step, you complete the interest interview counseling. The school will walk you through that. For first-time borrowers, you'll need an interest interview, which is an educational class you'll go through to make sure you understand all the pros and the cons and the ups and downs and do's and all that related to the student loans. We want to make sure you're informed. And then number 7, we'll provide the funds to the school on your behalf, and they can disperse it accordingly. And number 8, your school applies the funds to your account and provides you with the remaining balance. So anything owed after those loans are applied, they will communicate with you. The school will communicate with you to let you know where you stand. And then number 9, Ed will assign you a loan servicer. And that's why that studentaid.gov account is also critical, because all your information related to your student loan will be listed in your account. And you'll be able to see who your servicer is, phone number, address, website, for the life of the loan. So you'll know who to follow up with and so forth and so on. And then the 10th step is you'll complete what's called an exit counseling session when you graduate. So at the end of your 4 years or 5 years, when you get ready to complete your education and obtain that degree, we'll do what's called an exit counseling session, or the school will, I should say, to make sure you're familiar with all your rights and responsibilities. And then lastly, number 11, you'll begin repaying your student loans, typically about 6 months after your graduation has been completed and all your studies are done, unless you continue on to graduate school or med school or law school or just post-secondary education. You can continue to forbear or delay that repayment, but you will have a repayment clock to start 6 months after your graduation before the first payment is due. So those are the 11 steps of the student loan process. Next slide. Common sources of aid. You want to make sure you're looking at all sources, not just one. And we represent federal student aid, which is the largest supplier of funds, over $15 billion annually that goes out to the nation's students. But there are state funds, local government funds, colleges, universities give institutional dollars, private organizations like United Negro College Funds, Thurgood Marshall, Kiwanis clubs, and several other organizations, fraternities, sororities, churches, all kinds of private organizations you want to seek out to see of the groups, of the types of sources, how much dollars you can actually obtain and use towards your education. Again, you want to make sure that you're pursuing an education or a degree at a career school and university, as I mentioned earlier in the eligibility criteria. But again, look at all sources, not just one. And cumulatively, all of them combined, you could potentially cover your cost of educational expenses entirely or partially or 50%, 25%, but all of this support, I'm sure, is necessary and will help. Next slide. Types of federal financial aid programs that we offer when completing the FAFSA forms. I mentioned earlier, federal student aid provides monies in the form of grants, work study, or loans. And some students will receive those funds entirely, all three different types of aid, and some will only receive grants, and some will only receive loans, et cetera, et cetera. Again, there's other types of aid I mentioned earlier, institutional aid, as well as state aids and other funds you want to consider as well. So visit our studentaid.gov website. You see the URL at the bottom of the screen and learn more about the federal financial aid program. But once you submit that FAFSA form, you're actually requesting the federal government to consider you for all types of federal aid. And we'll do that once you submit your application with all the required information that's necessary. Next slide. Federal grant program. Our biggest program is our federal Pell Grant program. And also, if you are eligible for a Pell Grant, you'll also be eligible for a federal supplemental education opportunity grant, as well as a Teach grant for those who are interested in pursuing an education degree. And we want to make sure that if you are interested in these programs, that your FAFSA is submitted early and as soon as possible, because some of the funds, like the FSELG, Federal Supplemental Education Opportunity Grant, those funds run out, whereas the Pell Grant funds do not run out. So if you're eligible for the Pell Grant, you're most likely eligible for SELG grant as well. But if you fill the FAFSA form out late and you're eligible for that grant and it's run out, you will not be able to obtain it. So we don't want you to miss your opportunity, which is why we encourage you to get your FSA ID and get the FAFSA form submitted so we can determine your eligibility and if you're eligible for all these programs combined. And the school will let you know once they receive your information if you're eligible for that grant. Next slide. Federal work study. What's that all about? Well, it's an opportunity for students to work part-time while they're in school, obtain a degree. So we want to make sure that you are checking the box. There's a question on the FAFSA that indicates, or ask the question if you're interested in receiving federal work study. I would suggest you always check yes on that box. And this is an annual form. So if you're interested in receiving federal aid each of the years that you're in school, you'll complete a FAFSA each year. So this year, for those freshmen who will be in freshman the 25-26 year, you'll complete this year's application. You'll do another one the sophomore year, and another one the junior year, and another one the fourth year as your senior year. But again, federal work study is an opportunity to earn money while you're in school, whether you're working on campus or some programs have opportunities off campus. And those funds will be coming to you directly in the form of cash or check, and you'll follow up with your school and you'll learn their process of how they disperse those funds. But those are dollars that we provide to the school on your behalf so you can earn monies while you are pursuing your educational opportunities. Next slide. Again, we talked a lot about the educational loan process earlier. We want to make sure that you understand the difference between our subsidized and our unsubsidized loan. Those are a couple of our biggest programs. We also have a Parent Plus loan, and we also have the Graduate Plus loan as well for those students at that level. But the biggest difference, I would say, between the subsidized and the unsubsidized loan, and these are student loans that students can obtain, is interest. Whereas the subsidized loan, the federal government is paying the interest while you're in school, and you're only required to pay the principal amount. Whereas if you receive additional unsubsidized loan, the government is not paying the interest, and you'll be required to pay any interest along with the principal amount. So for example, if you borrow, let's say $1,000 in subsidized loans, then the student will only be required to pay back the $1,000 principal amount, because the government paid the interest while you're in school. If you obtain or borrow $1,000 in the unsubsidized loan, then you will be required to pay back at repayment time the $1,000 principal plus any interest that accrued. So you want to make sure that you understand the difference between subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And these are student loans that the students will be responsible for paying back after graduation when the repayment clock begins. Again, so you want to make sure you determine first what your need is. We always recommend don't borrow in excess of what you need. So make sure you determine what you need and only borrow that amount, because these funds will be required to be repaid. If you do, we're not pushing loans on anybody, but if you do find that you're in that category where you'll be participating in a loan program, that you stick with federal loans, because our loans are going to offer you the most flexibility over private loans in terms of interest rates, lower interest rates, and repayment options when that time comes. So you want to make sure you're in the federal program as opposed to bank loans or private loans, which in most cases will require you to start repaying after the funds are initially dispersed, where we'll give the option. If you want to pay while you're in school, you can. If you don't want to pay until after you graduate, you have that option as well based on your financial situation. So you want to make sure that you understand about your loan program. And we'll go over this information again, or the school will, during your entrance and exit interview process. Next slide. Again, for those parents who want to borrow on behalf of their students, you can do that by applying for a direct Parent Plus loan. These are programs or a loan program that have higher loan limits that allow you to borrow more based on the cost of attendance that you have at the school you're attending. So you, the parent, can borrow more funds in addition to what a student may be eligible for, because those dollars have caps on them based on your classification, freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. They have loan limits, whereas the Parent Plus loan, again, they have higher loan limits based on the cost of attendance. But this Parent Plus loan is a loan that the parent will be responsible for paying at the appropriate time. So we want to make sure that you're aware of that. So again, visit our website, studentaid.gov/plus loan, for more information about that. And the Parent Plus loan is a credit-based loan, whereas the subsidized and unsubsidized loan I mentioned earlier are not credit-based loans. So the student, as long as they're a U.S. citizen and they're pursuing their degree and enrolled in school, they will be eligible for those loans. Whereas the Parent Plus loan, it is a credit-based loan. However, if you have some difficulty and you're denied, we have an option or process you can go through to work through to get or obtain an approval process on behalf of your student. Next slide. What are scholarships? And we know they're very important. We need all the dollars you can get. College costs are rising, and we want you to be successful with getting through. Again, scholarships are provided from a variety of entities like your state or the institution themselves directly, or outside foundations and organizations. So you want to make sure that you are pursuing those scholarship dollars. We can really help you find additional scholarship funds by logging on to our website, studentaid.gov/scholarship. We have a search engine that can assist you with finding those dollars that will meet your academic requirements or needs. Some scholarships are merit-based scholarships, some are need-based scholarships, skill-based, or some for specific kinds of groups or programs or majors you may be interested in, or just basic financial need. So there's a myriad of criteria that vary from scholarship to scholarship. So make sure you understand the actual eligibility criteria of those scholarships, the deadline dates, and what they're offering. But by no means, we don't want you to be duped or scammed when someone may be promising you something for which you have not even applied for. Don't be duped or scammed into paying for something that you should not be paying for, and you find out it's only a scam. So make sure you read the fine print thoroughly, and you're talking to legitimate organizations and finding out their eligibility criteria before actually providing the information. But you want to definitely pursue outside information outside the federal government's process so you can obtain all the dollars that you are eligible for. Next slide. What additional financial aid assistance is available? As I mentioned earlier, there's several other entities out there and agencies who are providing information. So you want to make sure you parents, you're talking to your students and encouraging them to get engaged in the process along with the parents so you can work together. Again, there's federal tax benefits for education through your tax, talk to your tax advisor in regards to that. Education awards and community service awards like AmeriCorps. There's education and training vouchers for foster care youth, scholarships and loan repayment program for those students, for example, pursuing a nursing degree. And you can work with the Department of Health and Human Services and also state entities. And as I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of free money and grants. These dollars oftentimes are dollars that do not have to be repaid. They're dollars that are most often renewable each year, such as my daughter, when she went to college, she was able to secure some outside scholarship funds. And the benefit was she was able to get those dollars renewed for 4 years. And so we didn't have to apply for 4 years. She applied her freshman year and those dollars were renewed. So you want to make sure you're exercising strategies such as I just mentioned, and you're staying in touch with those donors and researching those donors to identify what donors can support your educational needs. Next slide. Special financial circumstances. Isaiah mentioned some unusual circumstances earlier, but special financial circumstances. Isaiah, you want to take over and go through some of these circumstances?
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about your special financial circumstances, that means your financial situation has changed. Now, there are many times that we earn a certain income 1 year, and then it increasingly drops, and we're now faced with a total different financial situation. In that particular circumstance, you want to make sure that you're communicating that to the financial aid office. Let's use the example of the 25-26 FAFSA. We're asking for your tax information from 2023. But what if your financial situation changed in 2024 and you experienced a reduction in your income, an increase in tuition expenses at an elementary or secondary school? Just newsflash, that was a recent change in the last couple of years. Let's say you're experiencing high levels of dental or medical bills, whether it's covered by yourself or your spouse or your child, or you have a family member that became unemployed in 2024. Now, all of these scenarios are true life-changing events. At that point, you want to make sure that you are communicating that to the financial aid office. They're going to let you know what documentation that will be acceptable for them to verify your situation. They will go in and perform what's called a professional judgment, and they'll make manual edits to your FAFSA form. And then they'll let you know exactly what you're eligible for at that point. Now, we're not saying your financial situation, if it changes and if you experience any one of these reductions or increases, that is going to change or make you Pell eligible or make you eligible for an additional award from the state or from the institution. That we cannot promise you. But what we can promise you is that it will warrant a second look, and someone will take that information, ask you for additional information, and then tell you the process afterwards as it pertains to that institution. You should not contact us based upon your special financial situation. You need to contact the financial aid office at the school that has processed your FAFSA form and that has reached out to you in regard to your financial aid offer or letting you know what you're eligible for. Some schools will wait till you have been accepted into the school. Other schools will just take your information and process it. It just depends on the institution. So this is why you want to make sure you're reaching out to them. But you also want to keep in mind that the only schools that can process your FAFSA form that you can walk down this path with are the ones that are listed on the FAFSA form. So when we're saying list all those schools, you can add up to 20 per processing time. What we mean by processing time means that you can add up to 20, you can submit it, and then once it has been processed, you go right back in, you remove all of the 20 and add an additional 20. The schools that previously sent your information will still have your information. Just because you remove them on the second time you process doesn't mean that the information will get pulled from them. So, in a nutshell, if your financial situation has changed, you want to let the financial aid office know. With that said, we do have additional resources that are available for you. But we will be remiss if we don't start out with what's about to happen next week. Next week, we're going to be hosting a virtual webinar series with Fred and myself. So if we're good to look at and pleasant to the eye, you'll see us again on Tuesday. We're going to walk you through creating a studentaid.gov. We're also going to do a step-by-step, line by line on how to complete the 25-26 free application for federal student aid. And we're going to do so in two scenarios, one being by independent, the other being by dependent student. Now, each of these situations that we're going to walk through, we're going to act as if we're just that independent student or that dependent student. So make sure that you can get your questions answered, particularly if you are one of those students or you have a student that falls in one of those buckets. You're also excited to announce this because this is going to be available. You can look at it on your mobile phone. You can look at it on your desktop, your laptop. So we ask you, when you see this online, you see this on one of our social media platforms, or you have someone share it, please share it with your networks. Please share it on all the social media platforms. Let everyone know. If they're confused on how to complete the FAFSA, they cannot wait with their questions. You want to make sure that they step on in, follow along, ask a question. We're going to have representatives standing by to answer those questions in the chat. So please let everyone know that this webinar series is coming, particularly those that you know that really need to complete the FAFSA right now. And it's very important that they do so because each state, each institution have their own internal deadlines. This FAFSA form must be completed prior to the deadline. So if you're joining us, you already completed it, you just took someone kicking and screaming and brought them to this webinar hosted by Congressman Glenn Ivey, we thank you for doing that. Now, those of you that have not completed it just yet, put it on a radar and say, you know what, there's going to be a webinar that's going to help you understand the questions as they are asked on Tuesday, December 10th. There are 3 sessions. Make sure you sign up and make sure you join to make sure that you have no excuses when we get to Christmas time and everyone's saying that around their table, around the fire, saying, I haven't completed my FAFSA yet, and I'm a senior in high school, and I hope to not have to pay a dime. So, got to take the first step. And the first step is attending the webinar or sharing it with your community. We also have a federal student aid estimator. This will give you an estimate of what you may be eligible for if you were to complete the 25-26 FAFSA form. I really want to emphasize, this is an estimate. There are other questions that will need to be asked, but this would just give you a general idea. So you can then take the next additional step about securing the necessary funds, whether it's through grants or scholarships. You'll know, you know what, there's more work that I need to do. And this is not a news flash, but students, there's more work that you need to do. This is just a starting point of that. And if you are in a situation where you don't know who to put down on the FAFSA form, whether you're coming from a household of 2 parents were divorced, whether they were not married, whether or not they live in 2 different households, you want to know which parent should I put on my FAFSA form. We have created this year Who's My Parent Wizard. So you can go in. You don't have to worry about putting PII, which is personal identifiable information, in there. All you have to do is go in. You don't have to log in. This is a free tool that you can use to determine who's going to be identified as a contributor on your FAFSA form. So please go on to studentaid.gov or visit the link in the lower left-hand side of your screen. Now, we also we host and produce webinars. You might see myself or any one of our colleagues, such as Fred or any one of our colleagues at the Department of Federal Student Aid. If we have a webinar that we've hosted, you can find it on FSA Outreach. And if you are on YouTube, so please check us out. Please check out the videos. We have over 25 videos, if not, and still counting, on their various topics. So we do welcome you to check us out on our YouTube. Now, also on studentaid.gov, we have checklists. These are helpful tips, especially if you're joining late in the process of what you should know, what you should be doing. This is a very helpful guide as to let you know what you should be doing in the process, because it's more than just filling out the FAFSA. There's also reaching out to the financial aid department. There's also making sure that you're completing your college applications, getting prepped to start writing up your college essays. There are different things that you can be doing now to put you in the best position to secure the most amount of money not just for college for this year, but for next year. As Fred shared, his daughter was on of the fortunate individuals who understood it. This college expense is going to be a year-to-year thing. And so the plan was to try to secure enough funds for 4 years. It's always the goal is to look past this year and just don't settle on you just have it done this year and that's it. Your hands off and you're going to let things go. You're going to let the deadlines pass by, and then you'll find out that deadlines are every year. They're not just the first year that you plan to attend college coming out of either high school or attaining your GED, or if you're going back. It's a year-to-year activity. So just like you're completing the FAFSA this year, for the 25-26, you're going to be completing it for the 26-27. But if you're joining as a freshman for the next year as a sophomore. Again, if you're an upperclassman, obviously for the following year, including if you wish to obtain funds to pay for your graduate school or your PhD programs. Now, we do have a number of information and updates that we're on social media. So please like, subscribe, drop us a comment on any one of our videos. Make sure you hit that like button, subscribe button. It helps the algorithm, making sure that more individuals are aware of our videos. And the more individuals that are aware of our individuals makes them more informed. The more informed makes them more likely to complete. More likely to complete makes them great individuals and citizens of their community. With that said, we want to turn it over to our host and see if there's any questions. Go ahead, Fred.
Go ahead. Thank you so much, Isaiah. Appreciate that information. And as you mentioned, we can turn over now to our host, Representative Ivey. Take it away.
Oh, Congressman,
you got you're on hold. We can't hear you. Yeah, you are.
Sorry about that. Let me say real quick, and I'll let Angie take it back over. But man, that was a comprehensive and thorough presentation. I really appreciate that. And thank you for the upcoming workshops that you all are going to do. And to the people who are listening today, let me say this. I'm not great with Instagram or TikTok or whatever. So, we reached out and tried to spread the word on this as much as we can. But you might have networks. In fact, I'm sure you do. Networks that you can share this information with that I'm not aware of or I'm not tapped into. So please, by all means, share this information so when the upcoming workshops take place, you and your friends can participate in those too. So thanks again, Fred and Isaiah, man, those were outstanding comments there. And Angie, I'll let you take it back over.
All right, thank you so much, Congressman. So I'm going to go through a few of the questions that we received and keep them as general as possible. If you do have very specific questions to your household, etc., please reach out to the FAFSA team, as you saw in the previous slides. But I'll go ahead and get started. The first question is, do you create your account as a senior or junior?
Good question. Senior. Juniors, as far as completing your studentaid.gov account, you can complete that portion and stop. You can do that. But we're really interested in those who are preparing to graduate, which is your seniors, because we know you're going to be going to college the following year, and you'll need your information all submitted. But if you are a senior, it is critical and required that you do your studentaid.gov account, and then you submit your 25-26 FAFSA form, because that's going to be the year you're in college. For juniors, you won't be in college until the following year, and that's going to become critical for you as well. But it's primarily for those seniors. But juniors, you can submit for a studentaid.gov account early and wait.
Can I add to that, Fred, too?
Go ahead, Isaiah.
Everything Fred said, yes. And that's for federal financial aid. Your state may have a separate account for you to create. And we want to emphasize that because you can use federal dollars and state dollars together, but they may have different accounts and different processes. So when you create a studentaid.gov account, it's not the one-all be-all for everything. You have to understand what state you live in, whether or not you're a citizen or eligible non-citizen, and what's their account based upon your citizenship status. And then understand what that steps are. So sometimes we get calls saying, I created a studentaid.gov and doesn't have all my financial aid. Well, that's not what it's for. It's for federal financial aid. And then there may be additional accounts that you may need to create on the institution or with the state.
Thank you for that. Moving on to the next question. Somebody said, if married filing jointly, will both parents get an invite to complete the FAFSA?
Go ahead, Isaiah, you can take that.
Sure. So married filing jointly is a tax filing status, just for everybody to be on the same page. That is one of the requirements on identifying a contributor. When you're identifying a contributor in a married filing jointly household, we only need one person to be identified as the contributor. It's always good practice to have both individuals create a studentaid.gov. However, we only need one person to be identified as a contributor. In a situation where the tax filing status are married filing jointly, only one person needs to be identified as a contributor. Now, on the flip side, you have married filing separately. And that circumstance, both individuals will be identified as a contributor. So knowing the tax filing status is very important when determining who's going to be identified as a contributor. One helpful tool is the Who's My Parent wizard that is located on the studentaid.gov that would help you understand which parent to identify as a contributor in your particular situation.
Take us back to that screen, Isaiah, where you have the URL for the wizard, so parents can know how to get answers to that particular question. So if they're confused or forgot, go to this URL that you see on the screen here, studentaid.gov/FAFSA apply parents, and the wizard will tell you whose information we need by just simply putting your name in as a student. So it's very simple, and it'll help you with that information. Any more questions, Angie?
Yes, we have quite a few.
Oh, okay.
Yes. Another question is, where does the gross income information go on the form, or does IRS do the information for you? This
question.
is stating that they weren't able to see that information or the boxes to fill in that information.
Yeah, that information is all going to come from your tax return information. So when there's an option on the FAFSA form when you go in where you have to give consent. And once you give that consent, that's your consenting to having your information transmitted automatically from the IRS onto the FAFSA form. So you don't have to worry about tax return forms and W-2s and all those things, because it will automatically be retrieved from the tax return that we transmit that information electronically into the form for you. There are those who will be doing information manually, but you want to make sure that you are providing that consent. That is critical. And you can type that in where they ask you in the financial section of the FAFSA form for information pertaining to your adjusted gross income, for example, or taxes paid, or household side, et cetera, et cetera. So those questions will appear in the financial section of the FAFSA form. But again, for ease sake, you want to just go ahead and give your consent and have the information automatically transmitted into the FAFSA form automatically from the IRS.
So that leads to the next question. Are there any documents that families need to have prepared for the FAFSA?
I mean, we mentioned some early in terms of the tax return, which is going to be your primary document. Isaiah mentioned any other financial statements you may need to have. But if you've completed your tax return, that information will all be accounted for there. So when you hit what used to be called the IRS data retrieval tool, but it functions the same way, we'll transmit that information automatically, so you don't have to worry about trying to receive a lot of paper documentation before submitting. It will automatically be transmitted from a tax return into the form.
Can I add to that too, Fred?
Sure, go ahead.
One of the sections that I covered was around unusual circumstance. So keep in mind, what we said already was for the traditional student on a high level. But if you are experiencing an unusual or special financial circumstance, you really want to contact the financial aid department to find out what documentation they would be willing to accept to verify your situation. So that's why it's really important that what Fred is saying, everybody, yes, make sure that you understand that a lot of this information will be pre-populated. You don't really need a lot of a physical documentation. But however, if you do fall into one of these circumstances, unusual or special financial circumstances that we covered, then you may be asked to provide a documentation, but you need to contact the financial aid office.
I think it's critical to say on that point, if you know you have a special circumstances of any sort, financial or otherwise, and as Isaiah mentioned, you want to contact the school that you actually plan on attending and enrolling in, and go to their website first. Every school financial aid office website is required to outline their process for these kinds of cases. So go to their website, save yourself some time, and look at the financial aid section of the school's website to see what their process is. So you'll know before you even pick the phone up, what their process is, what forms they're looking for. They may have you print out their required internal form and send that in, but you won't know that until you go to their website, find out what their process is, and then you can follow up with that school and submit and know that you submitted the proper documentation. Again, every school may be a little different in terms of what forms they require. So when you've decided what school you actually want to settle in on, you want to make sure you go to their website, financial aid section of their website, and find out and learn what their process is to dealing with these kinds of cases.
Thank you, gentlemen. The next question I have is, a parent has an FSA ID from when they went to school, but they're unable to see the child's invitation when they sign into their FSA ID. Do they create a new one, or should they contact student financial aid for technical support?
Well, a couple things as it pertains to that scenario. Number one, you have to make sure that they were invited as a contributor. If they were not invited as a contributor, then they're not going to see that information on their FSA ID or studentaid.gov account. Number two, understanding the parent's citizenship, because if a parent is considered a parent without a social security number or undocumented parent, and the information doesn't match up 100%, then they will not see that information on their side. So the first step that we suggest is go back to the student, find out what year that they have completed the FAFSA form, because if they completed the 24-25 and you're looking for an invitation for 25-26, it's not going to line up. So you want to make sure that you're looking at the right year, and then you also want to make sure the right information is there, but you also want to make sure that the student actually invited the contributor. Now, this is in a case where the parent is able to access their information on studentaid.gov. If it's an access issue from the parent, then it's okay to contact our office to determine what the next steps, because in some cases in previous years, we had to deactivate one account and to allow for the individual user to create a new account. But that's, again, we just need more information to determine what's going on with that particular scenario.
So you want to make sure, again, parent, if you have an old FSA ID, I don't know how old it is, 1 year, 2 year, 4 year, or 5 year, I don't know. But to be safe, you can contact our customer service at 1-800-4-FED-AID, 1-800-4-FED-AID, F-E-D-A-I-D, and they can assist you in terms of giving you the status of your current FSA ID and verify if it's valid. But if it's not, then you may have to apply for a new studentaid.gov and use that going forward.
Okay, sorry, this is just the child of the parent. So we're saying hypothetically, if the information is correct,
This for the parent
and
or the students? For the parent we're talking about, or for a student?
we're still talking about the parent, but I'm the
Okay.
student.
Okay.
So, regarding the first thing you said was, if the information is correct and the parent was actually invited, I should just contact that 1-800-4-FED-AID number.
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you.
You can do that. Yes.
Okay, thank
Also,
you.
I would just want to add to that before you contact our office, try to re-invite the contributor. Just give that a try. Sometimes some emails go to different places, and for whatever, go back in, and you can log back into your studentaid.gov account on the lower right hand side. You look at your submission summary. You can see all your contributors. Go ahead and re-invite the contributor. If that doesn't work, then contact us.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. I do have a few more questions, but I'm going to try to make them as general as possible. Someone asked if students under temporary protective status or asylum or DACA would be able to apply for FAFSA.
You gonna take that? I'm gonna take that.
Yeah, that you named like 4 different
Status.
classifications there.
Yeah.
So asylum status, if you are in approved asylum status, then yes. So the key thing in any one of them that you have to share is that it has to be approved and processed, right? If you're in that limbo and you're in that gray area, you're not considered that classification yet. The classification has been approved. You haven't been given a social security number or AN number. So keep in mind, if it's been processed and approved, anything in that gray area, you're treated as an ineligible student. However, you may be eligible for state aid, and the state may have a separate application for you to complete to be eligible for state financial aid.
Or aid outside of any private organizations or church or scholarship funds or institutional aid from the schools themselves. So we're talking today about federal aid in our process. But again, you may be considered, you have to be a U.S. citizen to receive federal aid or an eligible non-citizen. And you can go to studentaid.gov and you can search eligible non-citizen, and it will outline the criteria for that if you're in that category. And that's the student we're talking about, the student.
Yes. Yes. And then if you guys can please go back to this slide that had the link for Tuesday's seminar.
Yes.
And someone else asked if they can start the application and then go back to it. And I believe the answer to that was yes, save the application. Another question was, every year of college, we have to resubmit the FAFSA application. And that is also a yes. And then one more question, I believe this is more specific to Maryland. I'm not sure you guys will be able to answer this, but someone said, if you have a Maryland 529 plan for 2 kids, but only one will be attending college next year, do you have to list the value of both 529 plans as an asset, or just the value of the 529 plan for the child that will be attending college?
I'll let you handle this, Isaiah, since you're a former state person. The answer is no, but go ahead.
Okay, so a couple things. Number one, the answer is no. In fact, there's 2 types of the 529 plan, it's particularly as it surrounds Maryland too. There's the prepaid college plan part of it that you don't put that value regardless on the as an asset. You don't report that anyway. Also, when we're looking at the 529 plans, we're looking at who's the owner, not the beneficiary. Okay, that's the key thing. Who owns the account? So if the owner is the parent, then the owner will look at you can put that amount on their end in their financial parts of it. However, the student's not going to include it on there. If grandma or grandpa or aunt, uncle, they own the account, you don't even put it on the FAFSA form whatsoever. Okay, so those are the key things. Is like, what kind of plan is it? And once you identify the kind of plan, who owns the account, then you'll know exactly if it should go on the FAFSA form or not go on the FAFSA form.
But according to her question, the answer is no.
No.
All right. And then if you guys can, if there's any way possible, if you guys can drop in the chat the contact information for technical support as well. And then the final question I have, if you guys would happen to know this, if parents are divorced, will the parents be able to see each other's private information?
No. I mean, if the parents are divorced, and we're going to look for the parent who provided the most support for the student, that is the contributor we want to see on the FAFSA form. So if that's mom or dad, you all can decide. We don't know. But to answer your question, when you log into your FAFSA with your SAID, with your not SAID, but your student.gov account, you'll be able to see your information only. And the parent, when they log in with their studentaid.gov account, they'll be able to see their information only as well. So it won't be shared.
Okay, and that wraps up for the questions. I do see two people's hands raised. If you can please drop the question in the chat. I did see an additional question, more specifically about divorced parents and the filing, but I believe you answered that question, that the predominant parent has to be the one whose information is on the FAFSA.
Whoever provided the most, whichever parent provided the most, at least 51% of the financial support, that is the parent we want to see on the FAFSA.
All right.
And you determine who that is. We don't determine, you as a parent couple decide who that is.
Great, and thank you for that clarification as well. And then if everybody is willing and able, we would love to get everybody on camera so we can take a screenshot, because this will be posted in our newsletters and for other guests who weren't able to make it. So if you're willing and able, please turn on your camera and I will count down for a picture. I'll give it a few minutes.
Yeah, and I guess you have to take down the presentation piece, right? Oh, there we go. Okay.
So there's our student.
Waiting, thanks to Fred and Isaiah. Thanks again. What an outstanding and thorough presentation. I appreciate it.
Anytime. For the good people of Maryland, Prince George County, anytime.